Thanks for joining us. My name is Brian Elaine, and I'm here today with our wonderful friend Jennifer Grant. Jen is an author and editor based in Chicago. Her picture book, Maybe God is Like That Too, won a gold medal from the Moonbeam Spirit Awards for Excellence in Children's Literature and was named a Book of the Year finalist in the Forward Indies Awards. To date, it's sold more than 30,000 copies. Her second picture book, Maybe I Can Love My Neighbor Too, was named a Junior Library Guild official gold standard selection. I can vouch for both those books. They're fantastic. She's written several other books for both children and adults, including two new titles coming out this year, one of which we're going to talk about. It's called Finding Calm in Nature, a guide for mindful kids. And it is absolutely gorgeous, as you can see. Jen has written for publications including Women's Day, a Chicago Parent. For more than a decade, she wrote features, restaurant profiles, and general interest columns for the Sun-Times Media newspapers, and has also worked as a health and family columnist for the Chicago Tribune. Jen divides her time between personal creative work as an editor, and an editorial consultant. She's spoken at many writers' conferences, including, of course, many at Writing for Your Life. Jen and I have collaborated on all kinds of different things, our children's and adult book conferences, Compassionate Christianity, How to Heal Our Divides, and more. She received her master's degree in English literature with concentrations in fiction writing and critical theory from Southern Methodist University in Dallas. She's a member of SCBWI. If you don't know what that is, Google it. The Authors Guild, Sigma Tau Delta, and the Faith-Based Coalition of Global Nutrition. Jen's also a founding member of Inc., a creative collective, and she's proud to serve on the boards of both Open Books and The Secret City. You can learn more at jennifergrant.com. So Jen, welcome back. It's always just such a pleasure to spend time with you.
And with you.
And congratulations on your new book, yet another new book. You have been quite productive over the last couple of years.
I'm as we were saying before we started, I just love the way that Beaming Books has invested in this book by hiring such a wonderful illustrator. And then just, it's a full color, beautifully illustrated book. And I love the motion in it. I love the way the illustrator just really, I don't know, dug deep and has created something really wonderful. So it's not a picture book, unlike, some of my other books for kids. This book is for slightly older kids, and it's, 30 pages long or something like that. But so it's a bit different.
Yeah, well, since we dive right into this, let me ask about that, because the style of this is much different than
Mm-hmm.
any other book that you've written. How did you come up with that?
Well, I wrote a book for Broadleaf Books, which is in the same publishing company as Beaming Books, who does children's books. And that book is called Dimming the Day. And I wrote that beginning in about March 2020. And so we were all on lockdown. And like so many people, my family and I, who were brought all back together, kids came home from college. My husband was working from home. We did daily nature walks. And, I know some people call them their COVID walks, but we did, very long daily walks with the dog. And I saw how my relationship with nature during that time really deepened. And I've always loved nature. I've always been interested in, TV shows about nature, Planet Earth,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
those documentaries. But I felt, as did so many people during that time, just a new emotional connection to the natural world. And so I was writing this book, Dimming the Day, which is evening meditations to kind of help adults address anxiety, calm down before sleep, not spend time on their phones getting more anxious and worried about the state of the world, but instead to kind of unplug and consider beautiful things in nature. And as I was writing that book, because I also love writing for kids, as you know, I just kept thinking, oh, if I were writing this for kids, I would point out this detail. Or if I were writing this for kids, I would mention this animal or this insect or this flower. And so I started keeping kind of a separate document with ideas for an eventual children's book about nature. And so I finished Dimming the Day, which has Christian content, it has some prayers, it has meditations, and quite a lot of scientific information about different things in nature. And when I was done with that, I then developed a proposal for this book. Um, and it was basically, this book is not, it doesn't have Christian content, but it has a lot of mindfulness content, a lot of practices that any kids could do, reflecting on things in nature and what they can teach us about handling our anxiety. It has a lot of quotes in it, favorite quotes and favorite, naturalists. I've got little snippets about what they've said about different things. Um, but anyway, that's it. So it kind of grew out of Dimming the Day, although it's a very different kind of book. I see them as sort of companion pieces to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, but again, the format, is so kind of unique. You've got, sidebars and,
Yeah.
just kind of questions or reflections on different things. Uh,
Mhm.
How did you decide to kind of divide it up the way that you did?
Well, I think when kids are reading a book that has a lot of nonfiction, it's not it's not, there's not a big plot for them to follow. It's really presenting a lot of different information. I think visually it breaks things up in a nice way if you've got like call out boxes and a lot of illustrations. But yeah, I put in
Yeah,
definitions and that was an interesting thing for me. It was a different process really because as I was writing the book, I was always sort of in this conversation with the illustrators and designers, right? So, because I would say, like for instance, let's say the spider webs chapter, I would write a little note to the illustrator and say, illustrator on this page, let's have these types of, spider webs featured.
hmm
And then I would link to them so the person would know exactly what I was talking about. And then I'd be writing along and then I'd think, oh, I'd like to have a little fun fact, And so the fun facts are sort of in these yellow call out boxes. And, you know, then their definitions are in these blue ones. And so I think that can be satisfying to a reader, whether it's a child or an adult, but to kind of know what you're, what you can expect. And you can also not just distract from the narrative with a definition, but instead have it sort of on its own. So I thought it could be a way that kids will learn some new things about nature and some new definitions. But then they can also sort of revisit those if they want, or they can skip that and just read the narrative. And yeah, it was very different. I've never had so many um, bracketed notes in a manuscript. So yeah, it was really, really different.
Well, you've created so many interesting, visual points of interest, which, as you said, from a reader perspective is great, but also I think, gives the illustrator a lot of opportunity, to do
Hmm.
different things. Um,
Hmm.
and, and so this is just done incredibly well.
Yeah, I really love the way she did it. And, one of the things she did that I think is so lovely and I hope kids will really connect with is there's so much motion in it. So
Hmm.
all the pictures of people, they're always moving. Um, they're really interacting with the different parts of the natural world. And there's some good illustrations as well of some of the poses. There's a few yoga poses that
Yeah,
are,
the downward dog,
yeah, yeah.
talk about motion and
Mhm.
action, activity.
Yeah. And we also tried, in the notes to the illustrator, I was like, let's keep, featuring all different kinds of kids with different abilities. And so there are kids who use wheelchairs. There are kids, with all different sort of bodies and ways of expressing themselves. And so whenever there's a prompt to do something physical, I offer a few different ways you can do it. So if a person isn't able to stand up and move around, they can do something from a seated position and so on. So I think it's pretty inclusive in that way.
Hmm. So the book's description says each chapter of this practical guide explores a different element of nature and connects it with a mindfulness prompt designed to help kids manage their feelings. So first, what are some of the elements of nature that you decided to include in this?
Well, and I've become such a huge super fan of the dandelion in the last few years. I also wrote about dandelions in Dimming the Day. But dandelions to me are kind of a wonderful plant to reflect on in that they can be overlooked. They can seem like a very ordinary thing. Some people consider them a weed to be pulled. But throughout history, they've had so many different uses and benefits to humans and also to other plants. You can make teas out of them and dyes and wines and beers and medicines and all kinds of things from dandelions, salads, obviously. Um, and what, by, I think kids, at least the kids I know and the kid I was, you can feel sort of ordinary or overlooked or like no one really appreciates all that you bring to the world at different points in your childhood or in your adulthood as well, right? But by kind of reflecting at a dandelion and thinking about not only its many uses and the beauty that its little flower brings to the world, but also it does actually help the other plants around it by its taproot brings up minerals and nutrients that other plants around it can use. And so in that one, I sort of have a few different practices, dandelion breathing, of just really breathing in and blowing out, which is just a deep breathing exercise, but we can do it picturing that we're holding a dandelion. And also just to reflect on how resilient you are. So, kids go through a lot of pain. Parents get divorced, their pets die. They experience all the things we experience in tragedies in the news. And my chapter on dandelions is really sort of encouraging them both to see the beauty that they hold, but also to remember that they're resilient like a dandelion and they bring a lot of different things into the world that are valuable and beautiful and healthy. So that's an example of one of the things. But yeah, I love the dandelion. My favorite chapter though, I think, and I've got to reread this book now that it's all, but is the spider web one.
The spider webs, that's a great visual. I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Well, and what I learned about, and I'm a big fan of Charlotte's Web and E.B. White's work, both for children and for adults. But what I learned when I was researching this book is that E.B. White struggled with really significant social anxiety. And when he was working at the New Yorker, and I mean, I have some of his volumes of New Yorker columns that are just terrific. But when he was working there, he was so anxious about people coming to his office. Most of the time he worked from home in a time that it wasn't when everyone worked from home. But he apparently was compelled by his bosses to come to the office at least 1 or 2 days a week. And when someone would knock on his door, he would climb out of the window of his office and hide on the windowsill because he didn't want to interact with anyone.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and he really saw and he referred to his anxiety as a true disability that he had. And the way that he would find calm when he was anxious and when he was nervous about having to interact with other people is he would go and spend time in nature, including on his farm. And it was at some time when he was on a farm and he was at his own farm looking up at a spider web that was over a pigsty. And all of a sudden, this story came to him. But in that chapter about spider webs, I tell his story about how he was a person with really severe anxiety, and that the way he found calm was to watch spiders spinning their webs. And in that chapter, I talk about how we can be stretched. So webs stretch across a space, and sometimes life stretches us, but we can grow stronger and find some kind of relief from anxiety by, looking to what we can learn from a spider who's carefully making their web and different kinds of webs. And so I'm always in this book trying to remind kids that they're part of a community too. And so I ask them in terms like there's a section on rootedness and what roots you. And so we talk about what things root a child. And in the web one, what stretches us. And so those are the sort of themes that I try to revisit.
So I know the answer to this next question is both, but do you see this as more of a book to be read to a child or a book read by a child?
Well, I think you're right about both, but I think what I hope is maybe a parent or another adult person in a child's life will read it to a child, but then the child can go back and kind of revisit their favorite parts. A friend of mine actually the other night said, we have your new book. I love it. And she has three kids who are, I think they're about now 4, 6, and maybe 10. And the picture, I think her husband took it, was her sitting on the bed of the littlest one reading this book, and the other two were lying in their beds just listening. And I loved that image. And she said they love it and find it very calming. And so probably for the older kids, they're imagining some of these things. And for a much younger kid, they like to see all the wonderful illustrations that Aaron Brown created for it.
Hmm. Well, clearly, just from a progressions perspective, they're more likely to hear it first, being read to them,
Mhm.
but then maybe as they are able to read, they'll go back to it and read it
Yeah,
themselves.
and maybe find a favorite picture. I mean, I think the cats and dogs section is so cute. Um, and I could see a lot of kids really connecting with those.
So you've launched a ton of different books, different types of books too. What have you learned, from some of those past experiences that influenced how you were launching this one?
Well, with this one, I have a few sort of events coming up, a few podcasts to do, a few interviews like this one. Um, I'm also, hoping that people who are, as the summer comes and as Earth Day and, later in April happens, I hope in an organic way people will find this. And, I think one thing that's true about having written a number of books is that I don't sweat the launches so much. Like this book was supposed to come out, I think March 21st was its official date, and Amazon started sending pre-orders a month before that.
A
So
month before. Oh my goodness.
yeah. And so
That's why
with
I got it so early.
right. And so, in some ways, I sort of hope that it will find its readership in an organic way. And as parents are hoping to teach their kids about Earth Day or about Earth Care, or as parents look ahead to a summer and think, oh, I want my kid to spend time outside,
Yeah.
maybe they'll discover this book and use it. At the end of it, there's an invitation to kids to keep kind of a seasonal journal,
Hmm.
and it's prompts about, and I call it a season notebook, and just have a very kind of simple, straightforward thing, and with some prompts for each season. So like in the summer, there's different things that kids can do, and in the fall, just to interact more deeply with what's happening in the natural world. So, I hope people will find it, and kids will use what parts of it are really helpful to them.
So, I want to show the cover again. This just screams spring. So
Right.
I assume that the timing of the release was intentional that way.
I'm sure that was probably, yeah. I mean, I wasn't a part of those discussions, of course, but yeah, I think too, Earth Day and people, yeah, people caring about, thinking about interacting and being outside, interacting with nature and being outside. I imagine that's why the team at Beaming Books chose March, yeah, as a launch month.
It just makes a lot of sense. And,
Yeah. Yep.
everyone was really excited right now for this to come about. I
Yeah.
know I was in Illinois recently, and it doesn't look like this yet. Neither does New Jersey,
No.
but we're all hoping for it soon.
Yes. Oh, it's that time of early spring that just feels like it's going to be gray and colorless forever. But yes, then everything pops, right?
Yes, yes. So, of course, I have to ask you about what's next. You've been so prolific and productive, and so I'm sure there's a stream of things that are in different stages. Can you talk about any of those yet or not?
Yeah, sure. Well, the other book that is coming out from Beaming Books in October, I believe, is a book that is more in line with the my first two books with them, Maybe God is Like That Too, and Maybe I Can Love My Neighbor
Oh,
Too.
good.
And this one is called What If I Can't Explain God? And um, it's about a little girl who is just noting how difficult it is to explain certain things. And one of the things is how when she drinks a fizzy drink, it makes her want to sneeze and laugh at the same time. And there are all these things that are hard to explain. And I sort of based this character off of a little girl who is a little girl in my life, a daughter of some friends, who is just funny and curious and precocious, and she's always asking a million questions. And so I sort of based this character off of her. And then she says the hardest thing to explain is God, and grown-ups are no better than I am at trying to
Really?
explain it, which I think is true.
Yes.
Um, And she says when she asks about God, they see things like, everywhere all at once, or three and one and one and three, and all these kind of indecipherable things for a little girl. And so she comes to her own conclusion about how she can not explain God and feel fine about that. And so it's kind of an invitation for children and also their parents just to be more comfortable with mystery and not feel like they have to nail down every facet of who God is or what
Well,
is the divine.
isn't that a
So,
much needed ingredient these days?
yeah, yeah. But it's cute. It's also it's already up for pre-order on Amazon too. So if anyone wants to see what the illustrations look like, it's I don't have
What's the title of it again?
it's What If I Can't Explain God?
What if I can't explain God?
Yeah. And
That, that's going to be really interesting to at least a couple of my grandkids. A couple of them are too young for that yet, but
right, right. Well, and it's funny because when I was working on it, I had just spent time with this little girl whose name is Emma. And we have a very close relationship with her family, and they come every summer for kind of an extended visit. And I had just had this extended visit. So her little voice and her way of seeing everything was really like imprinted on my mind when I was working on it. And so when I read it now, I hear her voice almost.
oh, that's great.
She's a very distinctive little person in the world. So anyway, I'm excited about her seeing that. So
Well, you really encapsulate, Buechner's advice to pay attention
mm.
in everything that you do, whether it's nature or people that you interact with.
Oh, thank you.
So,
Try to pay attention.
yeah. Well, it's paying off. Are any other future things that you want to talk about, or
There's a few
really?
other kids' books kind of in the pipeline, and I don't know exactly when they will be announced or coming out. And then I've been doing, a lot of editing. I still have like editorial clients, and so I work with people, who have an idea and who want to just to start developing that or have a first draft, and then I help them as a developmental editor. So right now I have a couple of clients like that. One kind of a longer I've been working with for about a year and a half, and he has written a memoir and is almost to the point of sort of creating a proposal and sending it around. And that's been a really rich experience. And yeah, I've just done, I've been doing a little ghostwriting as well. So that's been fun as well. So I've always got a lot of different
I know
projects
you
going.
did. I know you
But
did, which has always been very impressive to watch you, Jen.
well, I think it's, I was given such good advice by a close friend of mine who was a journalist. And years ago, he knew that I love thinking and about a lot of different things and love being curious about a lot of different things. And I was offered this job, and it would have been of writing about one topic, full time. And he was so cute. He was like, I want to maybe dissuade you from this because I know you like to do something, learn about it, go deep, and then go to something else. And he said, I think you're going to get bored if you were to stay in that. And he said he's the same way. So that's why he, as a journalist, was happy to work on all these different stories, but not just be writing about one topic year after year. And there are other people who love to just keep revisiting, you know, something from theology or something from science or whatever, engineering, and just really know it inside and out
Mhm.
and follow it and keep going with that. But I think this friend of mine was right that I like skipping around. I like being deep on things like with these nature topics, but then the next book will be something else. So I think he was right.
Well, we've had this conversation before. I mean, from a marketing perspective, it's much better to focus, right? And become the person who's known for X, right? Whatever X
Mhm,
is. And if
mhm.
you're all over the map, then it's hard to become known for any one
Right,
thing.
right, right.
So, but you've transcended that issue quite well. So that's, admirable.
Well, we'll see. I don't know. I just, this past year, for the first time, I hired someone to make a new website for me. And she's done a lot of writers' websites. And um, I said to her at the beginning when we first started to talk about it, and I said, this might be a little tricky because I have work for children, I work for adults. Um, I really love writing about nature, and I've done that in these book length manuscripts, but also in articles and stuff. So, but I'm not really a nature writer, and we looked all over. And I think she did a good job of trying to kind of incorporate all the different threads of what I do. But she said kind of what you just said. She said, yeah, if you're just a children's writer who wrote about nature, if you were just a children's writer who wrote about Christian theology, or if you were just an adult, but yeah, I guess in some ways I don't want to be one of those things.
Well, you've got a lot of creative juices, to apply to many different directions productively. So you've demonstrated that well.
Thank you. I do enjoy my work for sure.
So again, the title of the new book is Finding Calm in Nature, a guide for mindful kids. Please check out all of Jen's work at her new website, jennifergrant.com. And Jen, again, congratulations on everything. And
Thank you.
hope this latest book goes incredibly well.
Thank you so much.